One. All right. Welcome to Atlas Ag News presented by Atlas Media, the best live news show on YouTube at 12:30 on Thursdays in the ag industry.
Atlas Media is your go to for high quality media and marketing material in the agriculture industry. If you need high quality video or media marketing, hit us up. We will hook you up. My name is Neil,
My name is Clayton.
and we're your hosts for today's Atlas Ag News Show.
All right, let's get into the news. Hawaii farmers are hit with a flood. Hawaii's civil beat reports plagued by three storms in fewer than 30 days. Hawaii farmers now find themselves figuring out how reviving their crops will pencil out without insurance. Just 3% have federal crop insurance. Many don't have any insurance at all, and they already have reported more than 10.5 million in damage across the north shore of Oahu. Maui, Molokai, and the Big Island, with some losing everything from crops and livestock to barns and homes in destructive winds and severe flooding. Lawmakers have come to realize more support is needed for the diverse and small farms that make up the state's agriculture industry, particularly as climate change driven disasters become more frequent and the federal government pulls back on emergency agricultural relief. But whether that help will come in time to save the farmers now weighing their option remains a question.
This is something that we just continually see over and over again is a disaster striking. Farm budgets are so tight because of inflation and the cost of inputs that whenever you go as a farmer, you go through things like this. It's so incredibly hard to survive in just the way things are. And then you lump weather on top of it, and it just makes for a super difficult situation. One of the boys that is working here part time just got back from Hawaii, and he told me that he was there while some of these storms were taking place, and he said it was gnarly. He said it was unbelievable how bad it was there.
Mm.
So scary.
Do you think we're going to see a change in crop insurance and subsidy policies, or do you think we will ever see a change that will cater more to the specialty producers?
We saw some changes in the big, beautiful bill, but there's still, we hope to see added support with a new farm bill. Washington is very polarized. To get that through the finish line is going to be incredibly difficult. But yes, specialty producers especially need help, and and we hope that the farm bill will address those concerns. The difficult thing is getting everybody in Washington on the same page. You know.
And does the specialty crop lobby have the power that all of our commodity crop lobbies have? Because
No, they don't, and that's one of the most difficult positions to be in Washington is when you're poorly funded. When you don't have enough dollars to get the right lawyer or in the right offices that you need to get into to be able um, to push your agenda. And I just hope that grassroots efforts and that understanding members of Congress they'll realize the need that especially if they really do believe what they say, which is we want to help the small farmer. um, they need to get on board with helping the small farmer. I mean, there's a lot of the majority of farms in America are still small and really worldwide, and we need to support those people. They're producing some of our healthiest food, and they're doing it sustainably already, without a lot of the things that us large farmers have, uh, in in ways of crop insurance or chemicals. They don't have a lot of crop insurance and they don't have chemicals, and which is
Mm.
exactly what the American public wants. So we need to support those guys, and I hope members of Congress will realize that yes, they don't have the funding that the large farm groups have, but we do still have a need for those growers, and as the American public wants those producers to be there.
Mm.
So let's support them.
Yeah. The question will be the American people say they want it, but will they be willing to pay the price for it? because what I've seen from my conversations with specialty growers is they're facing a lot of the same pressures that commodity growers are, and actually they're facing it sooner and faster than guys with corn, wheat, or soybeans are. Their competition from Mexico and South America, that's been a conversation for them for a decade now. You talk to a lot of the specialty producers in Florida or California, their major competitor is Mexico, and they can't compete price wise with the same way a Mexican farm can because their cost of labor and their cost of production is so much lower than what it is here in the US, and it just makes it really hard. So it's that's why I think it would be cool to see a shift from some crop dollars that subsidize current crops and some of the insurance programs that do exist in the large commodity space shift dollar wise to some more specialty growers so that we could see hopefully more farms started, or the existing farms have more financial stability to make like moves to provide and feed our population but also compete at a global scale.
Agree.
So, all right, we got a planting progress report. DTN reports the nation's winter wheat crop is starting the 2026 growing season in the worse shape than last year's crop. According to USDA's NASS weekly crop progress report released on Monday, NASS estimated the U.S. winter wheat condition at 35% good to excellent, 13 points below 48% at the same time last year, amid widespread drought in the central and southern plains, according to the DTN lead analyst Rhett Montgomery. Winter wheat crop condition. An estimated 31% of winter wheat was rated poor to very poor as of April 5th, up from 21% a year ago. According to NASS, Oklahoma had the highest very poor to poor rating at 54%, followed by Texas with a 51% very poor to poor rating, and Colorado with a 49% very poor to poor rating. Top winter wheat producer Kansas crop was rated 38% good to excellent, 38% fair, and 24% very poor to poor. Washington's crop was rated at 86% good to excellent. Crop development, 7% of winter wheat was headed nationwide as of Sunday. That's 2 percentage points ahead of last year's 5% and equal to the 5-year average. Texas's winter wheat was 30% headed, 7 points ahead of last year's 23%, and 5 points ahead of the state's average pace of 25%. And then we've got corn. Planting progress is about 3%, was planted nationwide as of Sunday, 1 point ahead of 2% last year, and equal to the 5-year average. It's very close to the expected national pace for early April, with Texas leading the way at 59% complete, Montgomery said. And then spring wheat. Planting progress is at 2% of crop was planted nationwide as of April 5th, 1 point behind last year's 3% and equal to the 5-year average. Idaho's crop was 18% planted, at pace last year, but 4 point ahead of average, the 5-year average, and Washington's crop was 12% planted.
You know,
So,
lots of drought concerns, I think.
mhm,
Definitely what I've noticed here is our wheat. For this is the third year in a row now that we're ahead of schedule for
yep,
wheat harvest. Wheat's advancing very rapidly due to our warm temperatures. Um,
mm,
we also have drought concerns here. We did receive 7 tenths of rain last week, but the ground is uh, so poorly hydrated that
mm,
if we don't receive beneficial rains,
yep,
coming into the May heading period and milk period, the wheat is definitely going to be hurt.
yeah,
And I think that's, concerned all through the southern plains and into the west.
yeah,
The friends of mine in Idaho say that their ground is very dry out there. They didn't receive the snowfall that they normally receive, and
mm.
it's just a problem nationwide.
Yeah, and I think with some of that dryness, and there's seems to be a lot more heat in the Western Hemisphere than it was expected. It seems like everything's moving faster, which is probably going to hurt overall yield later in the year. So it's not looking good for winter wheat crops if you're in the plains or Texas. So sorry about that, friends. Yeah, corn it is 1% ahead of last year. I feel like Kentucky is largely responsible for that. It seems like everyone there is just full steam ahead. Haven't seen anyone here in Iowa planting yet. I'm sure guys want to try, but it's gonna rain here for 7 more days, so I'd recommend probably not trying. So, yeah. All right, we will save the WASDE report for a little bit later when we have one of our guests on. Let's head into Nebraska fire recovery. Um, Farm Progress reports after almost 900,000 acres of Nebraska ranch land and crop ground burned in multiple wildfires since March 12th across the central and western parts of the state, it's hard to find any silver lining. With a displacement of tens of thousands of cattle and great losses by residents in and adjacent to the fires, Nebraska Extension is partnering with the USDA to hold 3 wildlife recovery meetings in the hardest hit locations. What to expect. These meetings will discuss disaster assistance program and available resources, along with support for livestock and forage losses, grazing land restoration, technical assistance, range and pasture recovery, and strategies for personal health and well-being during these disasters. Each meeting will include a free meal and the ability to network with professionals as well as others going through the same calamities. Sessions will talk about Farm Service Agency assistance programs, natural resources, resources of conservation, service restoration, technical support, extension resources, farmer and rancher fire experiences, and the discussion about next steps moving forward. Just a quick comment on this. If you are in Nebraska and are affected by the wildfires and there is a need you have, do not be afraid to reach out to Farm Rescue. We've done work with Farm Rescue in the past. We've partnered with them. They are actively loading hay out now and shipping it out to Nebraska from other parts of the country, all at a service to the farmer. They're a nonprofit. They do excellent work. Every time there's big fires happening or there's some sort of disaster, especially if it's in a state they cover, our friends at Farm Rescue are actively moving and helping producers. So that's just a quick note there. But Neil, I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so when I was in Washington last week, I was with the guys that do Lonesome Lands, a podcast. So shout out to
Mhm,
those guys, Shad and Jim. Um, they are, right in this area, not in Nebraska, but they're
mhm,
just in the American West, and they, talk to a lot of these ranchers. And from what I'm understanding from those guys,
mhm,
there is a lack of resources available to the people that are affected by this. And they said that there is a lot of small groups popping up, but
mhm.
there's a lot of disorganization,
Yeah.
and then the farmers that are affected don't know how to get a hold of the resources available to them. So that's a problem. I would like to see somebody in the government step up,
Hmm.
um, or a very organized farm group that could like kind of glean through some of the resources available and then put something online that just
Hmm.
shows or tells these farmers and ranchers that are affected by this disaster, here's the resources that are available to
Hmm.
you. Here's the people that you can get a hold of, just so that um, the resources that are available aren't being able to be handed out just because these people don't know that they're available to them. So,
Yeah.
lack of knowledge and then disorganization, I think, is causing major trouble.
Yeah, and whenever I'm talking to the farm rescue crew about how we can help them and how we can participate, their number one thing is like, "Hey, we just need people to know about who we are, so that way when they need help, they can call." It's just as much a PR issue as it is anything else. There is help out there. It's just, can we get the knowledge out there that, hey, there are people here to help you? So 100%, I think the USDA should take a lead on that and just have a resources section available where there are vetted organizations that help with, because I've run into the same thing. There's multiple people I know who have run organizations like that or have funds or nonprofits that help with these things. The problem is you would have no idea who they are unless you met that person in public. So,
Yeah, and I'd say if you're a rancher or farmer affected and you need help, reach out to Clayton and I. We can help get you in touch with the people that you need to be in touch with that can help you. So there
100%.
is resources available for you. Don't be scared to reach out and ask for help. That's what we're here for.
Yep.
Uh, you know,
Yeah,
that's what we're here
100%.
for. So
All right, let's get into the weeds, literally. Water hemp continues to resist chemicals. Farm Progress reports water hemp isn't just a nuisance, but a growing threat that's spreading faster and becoming harder to control. It's showing up in places where it wasn't a problem before, said Kevin Bradley, weed specialist of University of Missouri Extension. From hotspot states like Missouri and Illinois, water hemp is moving into Minnesota, North Dakota, and even New York. It's not only spreading, but it's also adapting to traditional herbicides, making it a challenge for farmers nationwide to control. In the US and the Midwest, particularly, water hemp is resistant to 2,4-D as well as other herbicides. A study led by weed specialist Felipe de Andrade Felico, sorry if I mispronounced your name, at the University of Wisconsin, And Pat Tranel at the University of Illinois discovered that water hemp resistant to PPO inhibitor herbicides can develop from soil applied pre emergent applications, not just post emergent use. For the first time, we've actually seen in Wisconsin an official PPO resistant water hemp population pre emergence. Bradley said, "We have a PPO resistance post emergence, no big deal, but we have never really officially said this is also resistant to pre emerge. Discovering resistance to the pre emergent stage is concerning because it limits one of the remaining effective chemical options for early season water hemp control." Bradley said pre-emergent PPO herbicides such as sulfazone, Spartan, and Fluxamone Valor also control water hemp populations already are resistant to other herbicide groups. However, he warned about relying too much on Group 14 pre-emergent herbicides. Going out there with Valor alone or Authority alone is going to get us into that much more trouble, he said. Adding these herbicides are selecting PPO resistant water hemp. This makes it harder to control in the future. We officially confirmed our first dicamba resistant water hemp population in Missouri, Bradley said. University researchers are also looking at non chemical control options for water hemp management. If you have 15-inch soybeans versus 30, you're going to be closing the canopy at least 10 days sooner in the growing season. And for late season, water hemp suppression is all about canopy formation. Research from the University of Wisconsin showed that cover crops are also successful water hemp suppression. We need about 4,500 pounds of dry matter or of cereal rye, about 30 to 36-inch tall rye, to suppress water hemp by at least 50%. Even at reducing water hemp by 20 to 30% makes a big difference. On the harvest side weed control equation, there is promising technology on the horizon. Universities across 15 states are testing technology to control weed seeds at harvest, such as the seed terminator. These seed systems destroy seed contained in the chaff.
So I've been dealing with this stuff since the early '90s, and it's super difficult to control. I will say that cover crops, especially cereal rye, has been super beneficial to us.
Mm,
I use it actively. Like my soybeans are planted into it, and I've still got it growing in my field. My
mm.
cereal rye is still growing with the soybeans. I haven't terminated them yet, waiting for the rye to get tall enough that I feel like I won't have to, be as scared of the water hemp. I will say that layering residuals is important. So, a lot of the old chemicals that you don't think of using, like dual or treflan, are still very effective for water hemp. So, if you're working your soil, treflan's a good option for you. Lay treflan in there, with your sprayer, and then if you're already working it, just go ahead and work that treflan in an extra pass. That'll help you some with it. Dual, Zidua. These are things that we can, put to use that really works well with water hemp. Are you ever going to get rid of 100% of it? You know, I, it's very difficult, I think, without a cover crop. But with a cover crop, you can really suppress it or eliminate it. So,
Yeah, what are your
um,
fields with cover crop compared to no cover crop? Like, how's your water hemp population between the two?
with cover crop, I feel like I rarely see it. I can go out there and probably weed out what would come up
Mm,
without cover crop. It's difficult the whole season,
yeah.
we battle it.
Wait,
We
so you're
hand
saying that
remove.
cover cropping isn't just for the crazy regenerative folks?
I mean, a cover crop is probably one of the most polarizing subjects, and I know it doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work in all situations and in all areas. Here, it's
As
fantastic. I
someone who
love it.
spent 5 hours last night doing tillage to get rid of a cover crop so I can plant some wheat into it, it's not my favorite thing right now, but also, like, understanding the chemical properties that it has once it starts to break down in the soil, I'm like, "Oh, man, if I wasn't trying to grow a crop, like, right after this, or specifically a wheat crop right after this," it's, like, so cool. Like, the actual chemical properties of how it fights, like, weed resistance itself, it's super cool.
It
But
is cool.
it does pose a problem to some of us, and also, it's kind of a pain in the butt to put in the fall. You have warmer growing seasons, so it makes it a little bit easier, but, depending on where you live, there are times where it's like, "Hey, we're in the middle of harvest and the ground froze, like, we're not gonna be able to pull a drill through the field very easily right now."
There's so many different challenges associated with cover crop. I mean, like it can also be a thorn in your side. So, I mean, it's just one of those things you have to learn to manage if you want to use it. It definitely works in suppression of water
Yeah,
hemp and palmer, though.
yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, If there's a way that you can fight weeds before the season starts with something, I feel like that's, like, in my brain, just logical, like, obviously you should do that, but then it does come into, am I mean, I have to trade a sprayer pass for a planter pass in the fall. You have to make those decisions, how that all looks, and, depending on if you're working with, NRCS on some of that, like, you can get grants for it, you can get payments for it, which leads us into our next discussion topic. Trump is set to cut the USDA budget by 4.9 billion. I'll get into that. Progressive farmers Chris Clayton reported that President Donald Trump proposed budget for the USDA, again making calls for nearly a 20% cut to discretionary programs the administration does not support. The top line for the president's budget released this past Friday as a is a $1.5 trillion request for defense spending, while proposing to cut about 660 billion in non-military spending across the federal government. Clayton reported for the USDA the budget requests 20.8 billion in discretionary budget authority for the fiscal year 2027, a 4.9 billion or 19% decline from 2026. The 92-page top line budget plan released by the White House focuses much on what the Trump administration opposes rather than what the administration supports. The proposal mentions rural 12 times across all departments and agencies, but mentions woke 34 times and the new green scam 21 times. Diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) are also mentioned 26 times, while transgender is mentioned 16 times. In the executive summary of the USDA budget, the Trump administration calls the department a bloated Washington, D.C. bureaucracy with multiple management layers and many extraneous programs that are irrelevant to supporting an American first agriculture policy. According to Clayton's reporting, the budget states it eliminates programs such as radical transgender and green new scam ideologies. E&E News' Grace Yarrow reported, however, that the president's budget is just a proposal, and congressional appropriators have previously bucked Trump's suggestion to cut the USDA budgets and focused on protecting funding for bipartisan programs. Last year, Congress rebuked Trump's proposed $7 billion cut and instead funded the department at a similar level to the previous year as part of the November spending package negotiated to end the government shutdown.
Well, I mean, definitely the federal government is bloated. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Um, Now, getting anyone to cut anything in Washington is extremely difficult.
Yeah, even Elon Musk
That
gave up.
it's almost always a non-starter. I, you know, I do see that. Like if you're gonna spend that much money on our military, which we're probably gonna have to with the situation that we got going on in the Middle East, somewhere,
Do I wanna
somehow,
get
we
into
have
politics?
got
Should we
to.
talk about that?
Yeah, we're either gonna have to print money or we're gonna have to cut a budget somewhere. Um, More than likely, we're probably not gonna cut. We're just gonna print, and I think it's probably gonna exacerbate our inflation situation. That's kind of my take.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find some data on it real quick. I'm trying to figure out it, but, like, the USDA is massive. Like, the USDA covers so many different aspects. Like, I think it is one of the largest agencies in the government, if not the largest by head count. I think if you include all the military branches, the military is still larger by head count, but as in, like, an entity minus the military, the USDA just has so many employees. And because of that, when you see this reduction, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in there about the bureaucratic waste in there. We do send a lot of stuff overseas. The Forest Service is a part of the USDA. At the state levels, there's a bunch of other programs that are under the USDA umbrella. And so there is a lot that goes into it. It probably wouldn't hurt for the USDA to become more streamlined and efficient, but we have already seen a pretty decent cut in workforce. Like if you talk to anyone who's done anything at the USDA office, it's even slower than normal government work, which means it's pretty slow. So um, I don't know what's going to happen. I have kind of come to the conclusion if I need to go into the FSA office to do anything, I'm just going to anticipate it's going to take 6 months. So
It's so true.
I,
I
I'm,
was in the
I was going to
in
say,
the USDA building last week, and like it's so massive that when you look down the hallway, you need binoculars to see the end of it.
yeah.
And
Aren't
I
they
just
abandoning the centralization
one
of it too?
there's two buildings. One of them they're going to turn over. They're moving the people that are currently working in it to the other building where they have extra office space,
Mm,
and they're going to give the other one back to the federal government to
yeah,
repurpose. And
yeah,
that building's in need of major upgrades. You know, it's just so old and decrepit,
yeah.
and so that's one way that they're going to save some money is to
And
not.
to the credit of the USDA, their big reorg that happened or sometime last year is about moving people out of DC and back to regional offices, which I think is for the betterment of all of us. Having offices spread out across the country because the country is large and there's so many different regions. Like, yeah, there should be a major USDA office somewhere out west. There should be a major one somewhere in the Midwest. You should have one somewhere in the Mid South. Like, there should be that because we're going to have hopefully better representation and better inflow of information to the top because of that. So,
I think they're definitely doing a good job reorganizing it, and they're now, you're going to have farmer portals where you don't actually have to go in person to an office. You can be able to do it,
you mean
access it on your computer.
onlyfarms.gov?
Yep. So you'll
uh,
be able to access it from your computer. It should expedite things.
yeah, and we love them or hate them. It's the government. It's the government's never meant to be your friend, but we are so much closer to a socialist industry than we like to admit. The USDA unfortunately is absolutely integral to so much of the money flow of our industry. We don't have to like it. We don't have to keep it that way forever, but in the current state of things, the USDA is a part of the farm world and it will be because that's its job. So, how much intervention and how much control should it have on the operation? I think as little as possible, but that's my personal political stance. There's just a lot that goes into agriculture as a whole. We've got, talk about export markets. Like our export markets are dependent on the USDA doing a good job working on international relationships. We're supposed to have hopefully one of the USDA's market developers come on at some point and say, hey, like here's the markets they're developing, here's the relationships we're working on. Like that is not happening at the farm level. I personally wish we had more domestic markets being created than international ones, and they work on that too. Well, on the same time, they also are the major prevention from more local agriculture. So there's catch 22 with all of it. So, all right, let's jump into North Dakota. North Dakota, speaking of the USDA again, was selected to lead the nation in ag tech research by the USDA last week. So, Jeff Beach with Successful Farming reports North Dakota will lead the nation in a USDA push to improve farm technology and research. Federal officials announced to us Tuesday. U.S. Senator John Hoeven said Grand Farm, a research campus west of Fargo, will be a national program manager for USDA's National Proving Grounds Network for Ag Tech. Grand Farm will also be the first proving ground in the network focusing on weed control. North Dakota launched Grand Farm 7 years ago, integrating research capabilities from North Dakota State University at Fargo with industry partners such as tech giant Microsoft. Hoven said Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, who visited Grand Farm last year, recognized that North Dakota provided a model for ag tech research and could be a manager for the rollout. It's a huge deal, Hoven said. It's Grand Farm going national. However, Hoven announced the $11 million will launch Proving Grounds with grants, a collaboration between Grand Farm and the USDA's Agriculture Research Service and NDSU. Scott Hutchins, USDA Undersecretary for Research, Education, and Economics, said the first year of research will be concentrated in North Dakota and Georgia. The University of Georgia announced a partnership with Grand Farm in 2024. He said after reviewing the results from the first year, the department plans to accept proposals for research hubs in other states, eventually creating a national network.
A
So,
couple of things here. I'm always shocked by the amount of manufacturing and just the size and scale of North Dakota. Um,
yeah,
the amount of things that they do up there is staggering. The amount of crops that they grow, the amount of manufacturers that are located up there.
yeah.
To be so far north, it is amazing to me that the things they get done.
There's only
Um,
there's only a few things to do in North Dakota: work like a dog and farm.
So true. I think it's always great when you have partnerships between the government and private industry and the universities, when you can get those three entities together. And, we all have our shortcomings, not to say the government doesn't have shortcomings or the university system doesn't have shortcomings or private industry for that matter. But when you put them together, it cuts a lot of red tape.
Yeah.
It, it opens transparency up, and it is a big deal for great research. And so when you have those type of entities collaborating, working together, um, I think it builds camaraderie among
Mhm.
those organizations, and it should be good news for our industry.
Yeah. I've driven by Grand Farm a few times. I've talked to people who work there and have been around it. I was trying to make it up to their field day last year. North Dakota as a whole, I think a is a phenomenal state for agriculture, and they're making it very easy for companies to come in and work in the state. We'll in our next article we'll talk about that too. But the Grand Farm idea, the concept is it was partially funded by Fargo and the state of North Dakota, as well as with investment from the universities and Microsoft and Google and some other companies as well. Because there was a huge need for it, and North Dakota said, "Hey, we're going to remove a bunch of the red tape to make this happen." California has a similar organization popping up called Reservoir Farms. We're going to try to get them to come on the podcast at some point, or the show at some point, as well as someone from Grand Farm, just to talk about what's going on in ag tech. Ag tech, for a large portion of ag's history, has been a really cool concept that comes out of Silicon Valley, and then it dies when it hits the farm because no one tested it on the farm, because they're testing it in San Francisco, not on a farm. So the concept of the Grand Farm, I think, is great, and I think if the USDA can make some pushes to make that happen everywhere, that would be great. I wish where I lived had something like the Grand Farm. Like, I've tried talking to our local legislators to see if we could make something like that happen, and red tape. They don't really want it to happen. We got John Deere in our backyard here, and it's like, man, how cool would it be if John Deere put up a few $1,000,000 along with our state and our county and our city to invest in a test research farm for technology and invite companies in. It's great for the local economy. It's great for the companies. It's great for agriculture. Like, there's so many wins that come from something like this. How do we make these things happen more so that way farmers get better technology faster that's been tested already? So,
I
yeah.
think a good example of it is that Mayakopa Ag Center in Arizona,
Yeah.
outside the Phoenix area. I mean, that place is amazing. They have tons of universities and manufacturers testing things there.
Mm,
It's great for the local economy. It's great for those local producers, and it'd be
mm.
great to see this um, spread out over just the few places that it actually exists right now. So
Yeah,
great ideas all around.
I would love for there to be some sort of independent partner or USDA portal that aggregates data on some of this. So say, hey, I'm a tech company. I have this product that works really well in North Dakota. Universities and partner startup, incubators. Can you take this and apply it in Arizona? Can you take it to Georgia? Could you take it to Iowa? Could you take it to California? And help us proof test this a little more and add to our research. And I think that's what they're saying here. Like, I think that is going to be the USDA's longer term goal with partnerships like this is, hey, we're partnering with you and all these other groups around the country. So that way we can aggregate this data and hopefully accelerate the development of ag tech. Once again, government is probably going to take a lot longer than we want it to, but it's a step in the right direction. So back to North Dakota. North Dakota Ethanol Company plans to double production at plants. More North Dakota news from Jeff Beach. Gevo, the company that purchased the former Red Trail Energy ethanol plants in Richardton, North Dakota, announced this week it will double production capacity at the site. Gevo will add a second ethanol production facility capable of producing up to 75 million gallons per year of low carbon ethanol. Earlier this year, Gevo announced plans to expand the production of the existing facility from 67 million gallons per year to 75 million gallons per year. Paul Bloom, president of the Colorado based Gevo, said North Dakota, being a pro agriculture and pro energy state, is at the top of our list for expansion opportunities. We already have the core elements in place in North Dakota, including proven carbon capture and sequestration infrastructure. Bloom said in a news release, Red Trail was the first ethanol plant in the country to capture carbon from the fermentation process as it turns corn into ethanol. The carbon is stored underground near the Richardson site in southwest North Dakota. Gevo bought Red Trail Energy in 2024 in part because of its ability to capture and store carbon and qualify for tax credits and the potential for producing sustainable aviation fuel. Gevo has shelved plans for sustainable jet fuel plant in South Dakota, focusing instead on North Dakota. In the announcement, Bloom said it was going to build the foundation for sustainable aviation fuel production site at the site. Sustainable aviation fuel sells at a higher price than conventional ethanol. Yep.
Sustainable aviation fuel until the major shippers get on board with that.
Yeah.
It's going to continue to be stalemated. It's staggering to see the amount of fuel they burn versus just the commercial jet industry.
Uh,
And until those guys get on board, you probably won't see a huge advancement in that sector.
yeah, your
That
Amazon Prime 2-day shipping actually costs a lot of fuel worldwide to make happen.
it's really staggering when you look at the numbers,
Yeah.
how much they burn in comparison to your just commercial jet industry.
Yeah, and there's just so many packages moving around. The freight load is so much higher. It's happening every night. I mean, FedEx is a logistic miracle. The fact that you can overnight packages anywhere in the world is a marvel of modern logistics. But yeah, I don't think jet fuel is going to be anywhere close to being produced at scale anytime soon, a sustainable jet fuel. But I do think this is interesting coming from North Dakota again. And the question I wrote down is North Dakota secretly actually an I state? Like North Dakota is kind of playing the same game that Iowa and Illinois and Indiana kind of all are. Is like, oh, they're growing a lot of corn and soybeans and they got more plants coming online. Every time I drive up there, we got more soybeans and we got more corn up there than there used to be. Like, is North Dakota the new Midwest?
What's amazing to me is not only do they grow corn and soybeans, I mean, they literally have like 10 crops that they're growing up there.
More. There's like
Those
30 or something. It's crazy.
It's nuts. I mean, that those farms are so diverse, and the amount of crops that they grow is amazing. The land isn't as expensive as it is in Illinois or Iowa, but
They've
I
got
do know, and I know they struggle with water as one of their kind of struggles. They tend to be a little dry up there, but what a behemoth of a
yeah,
agriculture area.
and they take they the state legislative group itself takes agriculture super seriously because it's all they have. They have some manufacturing. They have a lot of oil and gas. Oil and gas is still probably the main producer of GDP up there, but agriculture county wise just takes up like if you drive. I've driven across the entire state of North Dakota many times. There ain't nothing out there but oil, gas. There's a few mines and then a bunch of farms. Like that's it. So
Humongous ag area.
I have thought about relocating our business to portions of North Dakota because they make it so easy for ag businesses to come in and do it. Like they are very ag business friendly and they're just business friendly because they know there's no reason to stay up there because it's North Dakota.
Yeah, it's so cold.
You talk to people, it's like, hey, how cold was it last year? And like, oh, we had like a -50 wind chill last week, but it wasn't that bad. The wind wasn't too crazy. It's like, guys, your cows are dying in the cold because it's so cold. Cows aren't just like you can leave cows outside. That's the beauty of cows. Not there, apparently.
I can barely survive the Kentucky 30, less North Dakota -40.
Yeah, y'all are weak down there when it comes to cold. I gotta be honest about that. All right. New grazing agreement receives strong support from farm and ranch groups. Mariah Squire with Successful Farming Reports. On Tuesday, Secretary Brooke Rollins and the U.S. Department of the Interior Secretary Doug Burham signed a memorandum of understanding to build on a grazing action plan announced by the USDA last fall. The goal of the agreement is to enable agencies within the department to coordinate and streamline efforts towards public lands and ranchers. So I'm going to pull this up for a second, but you live in Kentucky. You guys don't have really public lands the way they do out west, but you do spend time hunting and performing recreational activities on plenty of public land. Like, what's your take on ag and public lands,
I
working
think
together?
I think it's a great partnership. We don't have the buffalo herds that we once had, so we do need those ruminant animals grazing that
Mhm.
land. And of course, the government doesn't need to be in the cattle business. So, yes, we need to allow ranchers on that public land, allow them to graze our forest and our grasslands. I think it's great for the private ranchers. It gives them an ability to, um, you know, to take what nature is giving them and use it for the betterment of our society and feeding our nation that is, is so.
Mhm.
I mean, 300 million people here, that's a lot of mouths to feed. With them actually grazing our public lands for a low amount of rent, it
Mhm.
it allows them to produce beef at a cheaper price than if they were having to buy supplemental feed to feed these animals. So it's a win-win. The
Mhm.
land needs the ruminant grazing. The cattle ranchers are providing the health that those animals need to be able to live and sustain themselves. That land is just going to lay idle without
Mhm.
a rancher utilizing it.
Yep.
And it also provides another stream of revenue. At the end of the day, even though it's a minimal payment, the government is receiving dollars from these ranchers for these leases. So
Yeah.
win win all the way around. Um, I think we should have more access, not less, to
Yeah.
public lands. That's what it's
Yeah.
for.
And, yeah, as someone who used to live in, the West where there is a lot of grazing, I mean, I lived in an area where literally the rancher south of us would bring cattle up through the property onto Forest Service land, and I would like to think in part, and I couldn't back the science up behind this, but I would say a great firefighting method in a lot of those western regions should be increased grazing on forest lands because there's so much underbrush that could be eaten, it could be taken away. If you have a high elk population or deer population, it helps with that. But the ruminant itself is a key part of the ecosystem when you get into those large grasslands or those large forest areas. Like we still need that, and a lot of the farmers and ranchers out there depend on these leases for their cattle, and if they do not have them, it causes a lot of problems, because then they have to either supplement with hay, they have to figure out how to get some other allotment or easement. So the plan that the USDA laid out really is trying to focus on first addressing the vacant allotment. So 10% or 24 million acres are vacant, as in there's no grazing leases signed. Making the permitting easier. The USDA wants a unified permitting framework that will minimize duplicative documentation, which is key. You have the USDA, you have Forest Service in some areas, you have Bureau of Land Management in some areas. So you have different portions of the USDA and the Department of the Interior all trying to work together to make this happen. And the problem is you have, it's too many cooks in the kitchen. You get paperwork, you get paperwork, you get paperwork. Well, if it all went through one portal and all went to the people that needs it way faster. They want to do increased communication, so easier communication. Basically, it's just the government realizing that we really should build some better digital infrastructure for the government. Let's just build some better online portals. Really, the problem with most of the government is that we just have really crappy online portals. Like, why can't I file my taxes on the IRS website easily? Like, why isn't TurboTax built in to the IRS website? It's basically the same thing here. So, there's some other cool things there, like grazing management tech. We've talked about the collars before. Predator management. Kind of trying to figure out how do we deal with wolves on these lands that do have a right to be there, while also understanding like, hey, we have cows here that we need to protect. I'm not saying get rid of the wolves. I'm saying that we should not protect the wolves above all else. I think the USDA knows that you're going to have to find that balance with the people in California and all the people who have cows out on these lands. And then just overall, making it easier for the ranchers to go through the process. So it's a 24-page report. We're not going to read the whole thing here, but it's cool to see that there will hopefully be some grassroots movements that pick this up and can hopefully work with all the Subaru loving people that love the mountains for different reasons. So I own two Subarus, so I'd say that as someone who owns one. Okay. Yeah. All right. This is a fun one. Kentucky farmer plans to plant 90% of his corn acres autonomously. We talked about this a few weeks ago, and I know you're friends with this guy, so I think it's pretty cool. Dan Miller with Progressive Farmer reports Quint Pottinger, how do you say his last name?
Pottinger.
Quint Pottinger is planting 2,000 acres of corn and soybeans this spring, not from the perch of his tractor's driver's seat, but autonomously, armed with an iPad linked remotely to his 6 Series John Deere tractor, and Deere 1745 lift and twist planter. U.S. farmers planting autonomously this spring by one estimate number at less than 50. Historically, it has taken Potner 23 days with a pair of 16-row planters to seed his New Haven, Kentucky corn and soybean crops. This year, he's anticipating his crop will be planted in 19 days. Ames, Iowa-based Sabanto autonomous guidance package controls the tractor. Sabanto equipped tractors already perform commercial tillage and seeding operations, even mowing tens of thousands of acres on sod farms. Sabanto supports from 200 to 300 of its autonomous packages, controlling utility-sized tractors in the U.S., Canada, and Australia, including more than 20 working at the King Ranch in Texas. Oh, that's kind of cool. Pioneer's planter is a JD 1745 815 split row planter with Agco's PTX brand precision planting on there. Precision planting brings the Affinity Farms a pair of technologies. It's Gen 3 2020 monitor, smart interface, visualizer performance, yep, 2020 monitor, and Panorama, their field management and data platform. Data from the 2020 monitor flows to the cloud where it can be viewed in the Panorama system, and Panorama allows Pioneer to log in, view, and make planting changes remotely.
So Quint and his dad are they're fantastic farmers here in Kentucky. One of the most well-known operations in our state. Very forward thinking. You know, his dad is has been known as somebody that is an innovator.
Mm,
Quint has followed right in his footsteps. We hope to have them on here one day. Hopefully, when things slow down, we can have them on, let them talk about what they've seen with this technology and how much they like it, what the problems they see out of it. Just a great operation, and it's amazing to see them doing this. And I
mm,
feel like this is the future of agriculture. Like with a continually
mm,
smaller workforce that we have to utilize. Also, with the large equipment costing so much money, it makes a lot of sense to have smaller units that are able to
mhm,
work more hours without the humans in the seat. Not to say that we'll ever completely be able to do away with people, because I don't think we will. You'll have to have them
mhm.
to keep these machines operating. It'll just be in a different role than what we're in currently.
Yeah, and, like, yeah, they go into it more in the article, like, he is not removed from the situation. He still has to go and do some of the edge cases, some of the smaller fields, and he talks about in the article how he has had to optimize his schedule now, not around, "Hey, I'm in the tractor all day," but, "Hey, I should probably go out every 6 hours to refill the planter and put some more fuel and DEF in it rather than waiting for it to run out." So, it's something he's learned over time. It's not going to be an overnight adoption process, but even, year two, he's already figuring out how do I do this faster. And, we're going to work on getting Sabanto, one of their guys on here sometime soon. They're just about an hour and a half away from me. But this stuff is coming. I remember I've heard more than a few guys say, well, what happens when it runs out of GPS signal or RTK? I was like, well, we put Starlink on all of it. They're all connected to satellites now. What happens when this happens? What happens when this happens? It's like, it's not. You have to understand these companies know these things and they are rapidly working to address them. And I think Sabanto is a great case of they're not testing it on edge cases. They just like are actually having it work on farms. Like you can buy the kit and put it on. Like we're going to cover a story here in a second, but like, here's what happens when you don't design your product actively on the farm first. So it's coming. I think it's cool that he can still, pull up precision planting system and control the planter from his iPad. I think that's the coolest part. It's like he could live view from his iPad all of his planter settings, and he could be sitting on his couch watching TV, making adjustments to population or speed or depth and all those things. It's like, wow, that is a super cool system that like, we are gonna turn into the farmer in his pickup truck with his iPad just driving around checking things, you know? It's kind of a cool future to think about. I mean, I'm actively thinking about how are we gonna implement that one day? How do we plan for that? I mean, it gets me excited. It gets me really excited.
It's
So
coming for sure.
all right. Monarch Tractor, the electric tractor company, shuts down after spending $500 million trying to bring their tractor to market. Mike Pearson, once again with Farm Progress reports, Monarch Tractor, once valued at over $500 million, has closed its doors after raising $240 million in venture capital. The company, founded in 2018 by Silicon Valley engineer and Tesla veteran Carlo Mondavi, promised to revolutionize farming with the world's first fully electric autonomous tractor. Their flagship MKV model was a 40 horsepower machine designed for vineyards and specialty crops, priced up to $100,000. It featured 10 hours of battery life, camera guided autonomous navigation, and Time magazine even named it one of 2023's best inventions. Despite the accolades, serious problems emerged quickly. Burke Tractor invested $770,000 in 10 NKV tractors, only to discover the machines could not deliver. Monarch's promises. The autonomous features were severely limited and the tractors couldn't function indoors. When Burke demanded refunds, Monarch refused. Two Washington state dealers filed similar lawsuits in December. The warning signs were clear at the 2023 Farm Progress Show in Decatur, Illinois, where Midwest farmers expressed concerns about serviceability and dealer support. Monarch laid off nearly 100 employees last fall and quietly abandoned its California headquarters this year, leaving dealers stuck with expensive and underperforming equipment.
I think one of the problems with like these EVs or electric tractors is just the serviceability and a new technology. So, will this happen at some point? Probably. I think it's just we're so new in that technology that it is still it has a lot of hurdles to overcome. I think one of the major hurdles is when you're in a ag area where your grid is limited and also, the ability to get the parts you need to a machine like this. It creates so many different problems. Like with those type of things, uh, hurdles to overcome, it makes something like this almost impossible to use as a rural producer. So,
See, I
uh,
disagree with that. I think this could have worked. I think this could have worked if they had gone to market differently. I think they should have focused first and foremost on vineyards in California, where they already have electric vehicle infrastructure, where you are in pretty controlled environments. And that's what I think they were trying to do. They should have never left the state of California. They should have stayed where they have the tax credits, and they should have focused first and foremost getting the electric tractor viable and then bring the autonomy later. All I see here is way too many promises that you could never deliver on quickly. And so I think focusing on focusing on that first, and developing the tractor and then the autonomy to fit a market, then bring it later. And then don't go across the country. Just go one by one by one by one. You're not going to conquer the world overnight. So I think just focusing on stuff like that is going to be a big deal. So I think they could have made it if they had been managed better. I think if Deere came to market with an electric tractor tomorrow and it didn't have a good parts network, you know what? You green guys would still buy it. You would still buy the tractor and you would just wait 2 weeks for parts like that happens sometimes, So I don't think it's a serviceability issue. I think it's they just couldn't figure out how to go to market properly. I think we'll see an
that's
electric tractor in the next 5 years see some sort of widespread adoption, whether that's from the OEM or from someone else. Like I know Fence got an electric tractor and I think Deere has one too running in orchards and vineyards and stuff like that. So it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say is, like, if you're 25 miles out from the closest charging station and your battery lasts 10 hours, you know, what is how do you overcome that?
Mm. I I I think that's why I'm saying it's like you're in the wrong maybe you're in the wrong area, or maybe you're not. Yeah, I just don't I think it's a distribution issue. You've seen drone guys go with their drone trailers. They just got a generator there charging the
Sure.
battery. You could just roll
Yeah.
up your diesel generator and charge the tractor. I mean, you have a diesel generator that could charge a tractor. I know you do.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
not saying I'm not saying it's over, comable. I'm just saying that there's a lot of hurdles to overcome to get to the point where we're ready for this in the
Yeah.
ag space.
All right, let's get into a quick weather chat, and then we are going to hop on to a discussion with our first guest. So, Midwest and Corn Belt. The past week has been very much a roller coaster. We saw a record-setting surge of warmth. We saw about 80 degrees last week, which was great, followed by cold and drizzly weather. Some of the northern areas like Dakota recorded over 6 inches of rain. All of our rivers are flooded right now. I probably had 3 inches of rain last week. I did some tillage last night. It was a nightmare. Um, and then we also had freeze warnings. So once again, I also went and checked the field 3 days ago, and I could not get my seed depth tool into the ground because it was frozen.
Oh no.
um, so excess moisture causing delays. I don't think anyone's doing a ton of field work this week. You could probably do anhydrous today, but we're going to get at least a tenth of an inch of rain for the next 7 days. So Midwest is looking pretty wet, at least in my region. So we might have some warm things like that. I'll go check the field after this, but I anticipate it basically just being awful. Great Plains, the drought is still going. We still haven't seen a ton of moisture. I know Texas got some rain. um, Kansas picked up rain, some in western Kansas, some in Oklahoma, some in West Texas. But the droughts are getting worse. West Texas has seen almost zero precipitation for 30 days, coupled with unusually high evaporative demand. The rangelands are taking a hit, water supplies are stressed, and there are red flag wildfire warnings all over the place. And then the same, we talked about this earlier, winter wheat is incredibly dry. It's probably starting to hurt yields this time of year. There's a chance for some moisture next week. Once again, check your local weather. I'm not a weather forecaster, but check your local weather. Maybe you'll get some rain. And then South Delta, Florida has had some rain recently, but even then, Florida has also been in a level of drought, hoping for a lot of rain in those kind of inland areas. And it's looking to stay that way for the next 5 days. And then the West and Southwest, following some intense record breaking heat last month, that pushed temperatures to 100 degrees in parts of California and Arizona. The pattern is finally beginning to stabilize and cool down. Snowpack levels have started their seasonal decline. The earlier heat waves have accelerated the evaporative demand and pushed water needs higher for specialty crops in the Central Valley, but the recent cool down is easing immediate stress. I know California also didn't get a ton of moisture this year, so I'm sure they're going to run into some water problems later this year. Um, so hopefully they can get some rain and maybe some snowpack up there in the last few weeks of winter. So how have things been in your region, Neil?
We're dry. We did have 7/10 of rain over the weekend, but still, I've only seen our soil at this level of lack of moisture once or twice in my 30-year career.
Mm,
So we're very dry. I think the rest of the state wasn't quite as fortunate as we were. I think Brian, who's about to jump on here, will tell us that where we receive 7/10, a lot of the other areas 1 to 3 tenths, I think.
mm.
But he can tell us more about that. But I just feel like we're in a moderate drought uh, currently, and it could turn severe once our heat gets here pretty rapidly.
What's your 10-day forecast look like?
They have some rain forecast at the end of the 10-day, but the chances aren't fantastic. I think they're 30 or 40%. Hopefully they develop more as we get a little closer to those
Yeah,
those chances.
sweet. All right. Well, with that said, we are going to bring on our first guest. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Well, thanks, Clayton. Glad to have me on. Appreciate you, Neil.
So, Brian,
Yep.
why don't you just give us a little bit of an introduction? Who are you? Where do you work? How do you know Neil? Give us just a little bit of background.
Okay. Brian Smith, been in the grain business uh, dating back to 2020. Fresh out of college, went to work for ADM, obviously the world's largest grain buyer. Did that for 12 and a half years, and not sure why I chose 2012.
Mm,
But Neil, we all remember that year. Left the grain business in 12 and started working directly with farmers on the cash grain marketing side, and been doing that ever since. So about 12 and a half years with ADM and going on 14 years in the cash grain marketing world, and mainly work in West Kentucky, Southern Illinois, and Northwest Tennessee is where I currently work for. The area that I work in, we have 7 more consultants that are kind of scattered along that same area, and even go down into
mm.
southern part of Tennessee and Alabama as well. So we are all cash grain marketing consultants who work directly with farmers one on one, which is where and when I ran into Neil. Have
Mm.
known Neil for 20 plus years, back buying grain from him and his dad years and years ago, and so have enjoyed the relationship on this side as well.
Dang, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, just give me a little bit of, Neil probably knows more than I do, but like give me a window into what is like the back end of the grain marketing world like. When I think of ADM, I think of this massive international conglomerate that is moving so much stuff around the globe that I can't even frame of reference think about that. It's like, on the back end, what does it look like bringing grain from, the farmer to potential end users around the world? And how is that, there's a whole logistics network behind it all. And I don't know if I fully comprehend how it usually works.
So, I mean, what you are correct. I mean, ADM's a big grain company moving grain all over the world. What it really boils down to, and I think that's why we all love ag, is the relationships. And so as a grain buyer, I spent 12 and a half years building relationships with farmers so that they would want to bring grain to me. And then when they brought grain to me, it was our job to get it where it needed to go. Where I spent 10 and a half years of my tenure at ADM was on the river system around Paducah, Kentucky, which is just east of where Neil farms.
Hmm.
And so the majority of our corn, beans, and wheat all hit the river, and most of that went down to New Orleans. So just understanding what, to connect the dots from the farmer to the market, it just takes relationships, years of trust. And once you get that trust from the farmer and they realize that you're doing what's best in their interest, then you can help put their grain and the bids in position to where it helps all ends of the marketplace. And then, Clayton, as there were times, you'll have some truck markets. Like trades a lot of grain with Bungie at Cairo, who's a bean processing plant. So even when I was at ADM, I mean, there'd be times we would truck beans from Paducah to Cairo just to help satisfy their needs as well. So you are correct. It looks like an undertaking and something that can't be done. But ADM always has done a good job of putting a lot of good people in position to build those relationships to connect the farmer to the market. And I just tried to do that, while I was there as well. So easier said than done, but it is a task that can easily be done.
Yeah. So, we'll get into the WASDE report in a second, but Neil, why would you work with someone like Brian over just making decisions yourself? Like, how's your process work between you two, and what does that relationship look like between farmer and you, Brian? And Neil, you can also talk about this. Like, genuinely inform me because I am curious. I have a rough idea, but like, tell me how that all works. From your guys' perspective.
Yeah, I'll start out, and then Brian can add to it. Just from a farmer perspective, as a farmer, you have to be in the fields each and every day. You have to make sure that all those decisions that are happening on a day to day level on your farm, like when I should plant, what's broke down, the logistics of getting the seed, the fuel, the depth, the parts that you need. Um, all those things are filling our day, plus, our everyday lives that we also have doctor's appointments or our kids are playing sports or whatever. You're so focused on those things a lot of times the key grain is marketed or should be properly marketed in key specific time
Mhm.
and those windows are very small a lot of times. And so if you're busy on the farm, you're doing your day-to-day task, you're also worrying about your home life and your family, the sports that you have to be at. It's very difficult to be good at performing all those tasks, but then marketing your grain at the correct time. Plus, when you're busy doing the things that you need to be doing on the farm, you don't have time to do the research that somebody like Brian can do that's completely immersed in the markets each and every day. Plus, he's in contact with other growers. He kind of knows what's going on the ground. He knows how the crop's progressing, not only in your specific region, but in other regions. He also has contacts at a lot of the big grain buying conglomerates. So he knows Brian would know, hey, who's paying the best basis this current week, or is there an opportunity in a few weeks for a better basis than you're currently seeing right now at today, where a farmer would not have those insights just because he's not on the phone each and every day with, and he hasn't developed those relationships. So, um, the way that Brian and my relationship works is, I have to know my cost of production. I also have to know like what's going on my farm so I can relay that information to Brian, and then he's able to take that information and use the contacts that he has to more successfully market my grain at a more profitable level than I would be able to do just from the tractor cab.
Mm, dang. Got it. Okay. Brian, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah. So Clayton, so what I would say is, when I started working for ADM in 2000, I mean, we're talking 26 years ago.
Whew.
Fast forward to today, I'm in a business that really probably didn't even exist 26 years ago.
Mm.
So when I graduated college, I didn't really even have the vision then of being a marketing consultant and work directly with farmers. But as Neil has alluded to, and as I would piggyback on what he said, after 12 and a half years in the grain business, about halfway through that, I realized that there was gonna be a need for somebody like me at the table with a good group of farmers.
Mm.
And so in 2012, when I took the leap of faith, I was doing that with two young kids and a wife that depended upon me.
Mm.
And so it was a big risk, but it was a risk I was worth taking.
Mm.
And so it's been a blessing to work with farmers like Neil, and I have a large group of farmers that I work with in that area that I told you about.
Mm.
But as Neil said, I am spending, like right now is their busiest time of the year.
Uh-huh.
April, May, June traditionally are the best times to market grain, which, as Neil will tell you, that's the busiest time for them. So as
I
they're
know. I
busy,
try to call Neil every single day, and 9 out of 10 times I do not actually get him on the phone.
so it has been a really good fit. So timing of all that has worked out really well. So it's just it's been a job that I love. I've never viewed it as a job.
Mm.
I hope and think my clients can sense and see that from me. I truly want what's best for them. And then if I get that done, then it'll take care of itself. So, what I do in my partnership with the growers has been a great, fantastic partnership over the last 14 years. And I would also like to tell you that my wife says this as well. I don't think I'll ever retire. I'll probably slow down who I work with and reduce the number when I decide to do that 10, 15 years from now. But I need something to drive me, and I love working with a lot of farmers.
Mm.
And, I tell my growers all the time, I have a great football team, and Neil's one of those players. And I know what every player brings to the table for me, and what they don't realize how much they help me do a better job of helping everybody else. As Neil said, I talk to a lot of growers every day. I can pretty much tell you in every county that I work on what's going on any given day. I keep track with what my clients are doing. I'm verbally talking to them, constantly staying in communication. And then Clayton, the biggest thing that I would tell you that Neil even didn't hit on would be I try to take the emotion out of it. Okay. Yes, I care if the grain market moves higher or lower after a sale. But once I make a sale, that sale is behind me and I look through the windshield moving forward. So the information that I have on the backside of research, working for the grain companies previous to know how that side of the business works, growing up on a farm to see what Neil goes through every day, and figuring out how can I tie all those together. And once I finally figured out that somebody was going to tie all those together, 14 years ago, I decided it was going to be me in my specific area. But what makes me and our little company unique is we are very regionalized in a small area where we know the cash markets. I know every buyer that Neil's going to sell to or not sell to. I know every buyer that my clients are going to sell to. He's correct. I'm constantly in communication with them and knowing what they need and what my clients need and trying to figure out how to make it all work. So, me also staying, Neil talked about planning progress earlier. Every week, I can tell you right now, Clayton, my clients as of Sunday night were 33% done on full season soybeans and 14% done on corn. I'll get a new update this Sunday, and we're going to see massive improvements from last week to this week. and me and Neil talked this morning, probably going to be one of the fastest planting progresses we've ever seen, which is scary on one hand, but a blessing on one hand. And so, I've told my growers today, do you want a wet spring or a dry spring? Most of them will vote for a dry spring, and they're getting what they asked for.
Yep.
Neil did also say some of my clients got 2 or 3 tenths of rain and some got 1.5 inches. Most got an adequate rain, but we're back to planting Monday or Tuesday, depending on where you were. And it's been a fantastic week here for the, basically first full week of April.
Yeah, 100%. And you can probably, you have a better feel for what's going on in your region than the USDA ever could when they post all their prospective plantings or planting progress reports, because hey, I have phone calls between everyone, all my clients, all these counties around Kentucky. Like, I have a good beat on what's going on compared to people, at large. And that gives you guys, gives guys like Neil an edge of like, hey, like, we know what's going on in our region. We know what potential needs are going to be. We know what demand could be, what things could change later. So got it. Well, what did you think of this WASDE report?
Pretty much exactly what I text my clients before the report. I said, traditionally, the April WASDE is a blah blah report, and digging into it, before I dug into it, obviously I could tell there wasn't much change just based on how the market reacted, when I was sitting in front of it live. And so just to go through it real briefly, the corn S&D for the U.S. did not change. They did not adjust demand at all. And I'll remind the viewers, this report is 100% old crop driven. And the only part of this report that had any adjustments to it on the U.S. domestic side was the demand side of the equation. So with that being said, you have less pieces to change around. So corn supply and demand did not change. Carry out unchanged at 2.1 billion bushels, which was in line with what the market was trading. Soybean carry out didn't change either, but there was 2 key changes on the report. Crush went up 35 million. Exports went down just the opposite, down 35 million. So the net was 0. So just looking at that, you guys can assume that the U.S. crush margins are pretty good. We're having exceptionally great crush numbers on a weekly to monthly basis. But you're also seeing the USDA is concerned about exports, and a lot of that obviously being China. So, here in about 40 to 45 days, when President Trump and Jing are supposed to get together, hopefully we get some updates on whether they're going to buy beans from the U.S. or not. And that could make for further adjustments up or down on the WASDEs moving forward in the corn supply and demand. Not a lot of other changes. World numbers were maybe slightly bearish corn, but not much. Maybe slightly friendly soybeans. Wheat was a little more negative. We had some world production in wheat, move higher. One key note I'll point out, and this is not talked about a lot, but it needs to be talked about more. On the reports every month, the USDA posts an average farm price at the very bottom of each report for each crop. And Neil, those are important because those affect your ARC County calculations that are the big payments we're all expecting and hoping to see in October. So as the average farm price goes up, then that cuts into potentially the amount of money that the farmer will get based on the marking year average from the 2025-2026 crop. And of course, they take the final 2025 county yields for each county to figure that calculation. So with that being said, corn went from 410 to 415, and beans went from 1020 to 1030. So I'm just pointing that out as a talking point because that will be something watched, especially by the behind the scenes calculators of what the ARC County payments are going to look like in October when the farmer gets them from the 2025-2026 crop. So that kind of summarizes the WASDE. Not any major surprises, but be on the lookout for the May report. The May report is the first official look at the 2026-2027 growing season. that'll use the March 31st planning intentions that I know you guys talked about last week. And so that report will be more of a market mover as we transition in from one marketing year to the next.
So when they, every time the WASDE drops, the markets move. But there also at the same time is a large amount of distrust with these reports. Like I feel like growers are trusting the reports the least they ever have because there's just constant adjustments by the millions of acres sometimes of what's going in, what's going out. Like, you know, how how accurate do you think these are? And even if they're not accurate, why do they still move markets, or why are they still like, is it just kind of the baseline data for everyone that we're all working off of? Like, hey, we can all agree, even if it's wrong, we can all base it off this. Like, what's like the mentality that you take when you see these reports versus your on the ground knowledge of what's actually going on?
So, I mean, obviously, as anybody listening on this call and in agriculture, realizes, the USDA has an extremely tough job that I don't think anybody wants. Okay. And as much as we want to be conspiracy theorists and think that the USDA is out to screw the farmer, I think the USDA is doing the best job they can with the resources that they have. Let me also point out, I mean, their resources are less today than they used to be. They're more understaffed than they probably have been in a long time, if not forever. We have an administration trying to make changes to how the USDA data is pulled together and to help improve the trust in the reports. So, as I tell my clients, none of us know what the reports are going to say, but the market going into the report is trading what everybody in the industry has been talking about the weeks and months leading up to a report. So, Clayton, what I would say to you is, and I tell my clients, it's not about what the report said, it's what did the report say versus what the market expected the report to say. And so when you come into a WASDE like today's, you're not expecting a whole lot of changes, okay? Rewind 10 days ago, and I heard you guys talk about it last week. The March 31st is historically a major market moving report. It really wasn't, but if it was more to the farmer as far as being farmer friendly than others. So, yes, from the outside looking in, it definitely looks like the USDA reports are more negative to the farmer than positive. And mathematically, that's probably correct. But at the end of the day, it's something that we as a farmer, we as a grain marketer, or even as a grain buyer, we can't control what these reports say. So my philosophy going into a report, Clayton, is, do I have my growers positioned where we think we want to be? And that doesn't mean that every grower is going to be where I think they should be, but where do they think they need to be? And so, to be upfront with you, going into the March report and today's report and this time of year in general, I feel like I've got my clients positioned as well as I've ever had for this time of year, partially because we've actually had opportunities that came from a war that none of us saw 60 days ago. So it has been my job the last 3 to 4 weeks, which has probably been the busiest marketing I've ever had in my career. But now that I look back, it's exactly what we and I needed to be doing. While these guys were getting equipment ready to go and spreading fertilizer and getting sprayers, summarized, where they could go focus and play in the dirt, I was playing with my keyboard and selling grain. And here again, it was the busiest that I've ever been, but I'm thankful that I had that opportunity. And it's because of the war, the headline, that gave me the opportunity to sell grain at what we hope to be profitable levels for most everybody.
As I always tell Neil, whether we like it or not, war's usually good for the economy. Yeah. What is your, when you look at the rest of the year, minus all of Trump's tweets on whatever he's going to do in Iran, because it's every day changing, like, looking, looking at the rest of 2026, are you feeling optimistic for crop prices? We've been in this trough for long enough, and we've seen some uptick from the war in the past few weeks. Like, do you look at the world supply and the world stage and say, hey, are we in for some increased prices, or are you still like, hey, there's a pretty good chance we're gonna settle where we're at now or potentially go back down? Like, where do you don't have to speculate if you don't want to, that's fine. It's just like from your view of everything, what are you thinking?
So what I would tell you, and here's how I'm approaching it, and I think the majority of my clients would agree with this approach. I look at this year as more optimistic going into it than what I did in 2025. Okay. Now, my clients would also probably tell you that I'm not a doom and gloomer. Okay. I try to be upbeat and supportive and keep their eyes on the ball and not spend all of my time talking about doom and gloom and negativity. Okay.
Mhm.
But as I sit back and look at the fundamentals are not overly bullish today. Okay. Our supply and demand numbers are still adequate. I mean, we've got corn. I mean, we're at a 2.1 billion bushel carryout. That's not a 550 corn market. Okay. You look at the bean complex, 350 million bushels. Most would argue that we're probably a little underpriced on soybeans. But at the end of the day, we haven't seen a weather scare type market the last 2 summers. Okay. So the 24 summer, the 25 summer, what we all hope to see from April to June, which are historically good seasonal times of the year to be selling grain, we haven't had those opportunities. And if you didn't sell it prior to probably March 30th or April 15th, the party was over. Okay. This year, I'm approaching it as I'm going to go into this year with opportunities better than we've had in the past 2 years. I'm going to probably get guys more aggressive than we've been the last couple of years and get us feeling comfortable with where we think we need to be. And at the end of the day, we have a long growing season ahead of us. There's a lot of talk about El Nino from La Nina. There's all kinds of talk being going on right now. And as Neil has alluded to about weather, we're exceptionally dry in Kentucky right now. But I'd also tell you, Kentucky makes up less than 2% of the nation's corn and bean production. So I try to get guys to think outside of our back door.
Yep.
Even though our back door is important to us, it's not important to the U.S. and to the world. So here again, definitely feel better today about the opportunities we've had. I'm also a believer that could we see 3 years of no weather scare events? Yeah, we could. It could be the first time ever, but it's just hard for me today to think that 3 years in a row that we can go without a weather scare of any sort. So, and you hit the nail on the head earlier. What is driving these markets more today is headlines. And Clayton, if you, myself, Neil, or anybody listening knew what that next headline was going to be, I would tell you how to trade it. The problem is I don't know that some of the people making the headlines know what the next headline is going to be. So it's our job to manage the headlines the best we can, which is extremely volatile and extremely frustrating at times. But I've been using these headlines and unexpected rallies to try to better my clients' positions and put them in a better spot. And most everybody that I work with feels like what we've received the last 60 days has been a gift in the world of grain marketing. So for me to sit on my hands and do nothing and hope the market gets better is not a good strategy. So pushing sales, taking some guys maybe out of their comfort zone a little bit and pushing the envelope has been my focus. And I've probably been a little focused more on moving bean sales than corn sales as far as more aggressive, because I think the U.S. farmer ends up planting more beans than we think today for multitudes of reasons. So here again, you're not probably going to get the doom and gloom talk from me. I'm going to be real with you and real with your viewers, but I also want you to know there's some optimism out there. but don't think for a minute that the next headline can't take us down to 425, 440 corn, because it could happen before me and you could blink an eye.
Yep. Yep. 100%.
So Neil, what would you say to a lot of that?
I totally agree. I think, and before we go any further, I just want to point out to everybody, this is not marketing advice. We're just sitting here hashing out,
Yeah, we must legally
just
disclose this is not
yeah,
financial advice. This is
this is
purely opinionated views on things.
That's right. We're just speculating. But I feel the same way Brian does. I think Brian and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. There's a couple of scenarios that could happen. We could continue in this war pattern, and fertilizer continues to rally, oil rallies, and grains go up. A really dry early spring planting period is usually beneficial to the crop overall because people get their crops in early, then the rains begin to fall, and the crop is really good. So you can see, that scenario happen. And you could also see this scenario happening where the peace reigns, the war stops, oil starts to plummet, grains follow, you know, and with that, the market, people maybe bought fertilizer during the cropping season and then didn't have sales in place to make sure that that fertilizer that they paid a high price for was covered. And what a disastrous situation to be in as a farmer. And I think that's why it's so important that you have an expert backing you up, helping you work through those scenarios of here we have the opportunity to sell grain at a profitable level with this cost of fertilizer. Make sure you you don't have to lock 100% in it. I think Brian would tell you, don't go lock 100% of your crop in. Just manage your risk, and then hire somebody like Brian that can help you manage that risk, and that way your butt's not hung out to dry when there's multiple scenarios that could take place, especially in a year that's so volatile like we're currently in. Not every year is this volatile. That doesn't mean we always don't need an expert to help us, but especially in a year like this, where we're in extremely volatile situations, and the market could swing wildly up or wildly down. Also, our weather is super volatile right now, so many different factors going into place. You need somebody to help manage your positions, manage your risk. It'll make you sleep better at night, and that's my thoughts. I mean, I feel like uh, I could see grain rally another dollar for here, but I could also see it falling another dollar. So I mean, who knows what it's going to do? It's we're in such uncertain times, and like, we just see over and over again that the headlines swing it so wildly. And I think at some point we'll probably shift to a trading a weather pattern, but I don't think we're there yet. I think we're just still right now we're trading the war headline. And what do you think about that, Brian? You think we're still mostly just trading war headline currently, but we'll probably shift to a weather focus soon?
Yeah, I think 100%. I mean, normally I would tell you we've already shifted a little bit to planning progress or planning delays or whatever the spring brought. But this year, I feel like today, even though we're in the start of the planting season and we're just now really getting rolling in the Midwest, uh, yeah, I mean, we're 100. I feel like we're 95 to 100% basically trading war headlines. And you are correct. If this ceasefire truly does work and we get people to talk and get the shredder from use open back up, then I think that puts pressure on the market, especially if we're having good planting progress across the country. And if we're not, then we'll start to trade that. But today, and I think you guys would agree with this, with the planter horsepower that most every farmer owns today on the farm, the days and the years of getting a spring market rally on planting delays is almost behind us. Okay. You know, we have high speed planters. We have 16, 24, 36, 48 row planters. I've got 2,000 acre operators with 2 to 3 planters. So getting a planning delay rally just doesn't really happen anymore unless we extend that into the month of mid to late May. Uh, And Neil, what I would say for us locally, and I know you guys have went to several different meetings over the winter time, and you've heard several weather gurus. I've done the same. Is this spring so far is shaping up to be what they told us it would be, especially for us and for where Clayton's sitting. They said we would be pretty have a tough time getting it in early out, in the Midwest, but the Ohio River Valley would have a drier spring, and we've had exactly that, which has allowed us to be probably as far along as we've probably ever been, especially since 2012 spring, to get a crop in the ground. And do you want a wet spring or a dry spring? And I think we're going to choose a dry spring every year. So uh, that's what I would say about the markets in general. I do think, Neil, we will transition from a war headline trading market to a fundamental weather supply and demand driven market. But until then, you're just going to remain volatile, and big swings are going to happen. I mean, I think it was what, 2, 3 weeks ago, we come in here on a Monday morning and beans were down, old crop beans were down the limit, down 70. Who went home Friday thinking beans were going to be down the limit on Monday?
Yeah.
I can answer it. Probably nobody.
Yeah, I think nobody.
And you guys talk to enough people and read enough information. Nobody in today's market knows where the markets are going. And if they think they do, they're kidding themselves and anyone listening. But it's our job to take information that we have and do a better job of analyzing and executing is the most important for the guys that we work with, and allow them to go farm and us to go market. Neil tells me all the time, I'm going to go plant it. It's your job to sell it. And that's how we work together, moving forward, day to day.
Dang. Well, thanks for coming on, Brian. We appreciate it. It's always fun to have someone much smarter than us come and talk about things. Neil and I always give our takes on things, but it's like, well, we don't actually know that much. We don't stare at these charts all day. We just have rough estimates for what we think is going on worldwide. So thanks for your time, Brian. Where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
I'm not as much on the socials as you guys are. But if anybody reaches out, they can reach out to you guys, and then Neil can filter that. Appreciate you guys having me on. Neil, I told Clayton this earlier. I've listened to a few of your guys' shows. I feel like you guys are doing a good job of trying to bring a new realm of outside noise into the farmer, and how can they utilize it. But you're right, Clayton. It's hard to be an expert at every field in the agriculture market, but you guys are trying to do a good job of bringing collectively everything that you guys know, or bringing other people that are maybe experts more than you in certain areas. And I think you guys are doing a good job for your viewers.
Well, appreciate that. I mean, most of it's the fancy cameras that make us look good, and then we're able to improvise everything else, and here we are a few years later running a company. So, all right. Well, Brian, thanks for coming on. We're gonna jump back into some show notes. Yeah, it was good chatting.
All right,
Thank you,
appreciate
Brian.
All right. Well, that was fun. We had our first guest on. That was a great time.
Yeah, he's a great dude too. Brian, he's with CMS Grain Marketing. I highly recommend, if you're in this Kentucky, Tennessee, Southern Illinois area, reaching out to Brian or one of his his coworkers, and getting on board with them. They've done a great service for our farm, for the last over a decade now. So can't say enough good about him and the service they provide, and it'll just give you an extra tool for your toolbox. So
yeah,
I appreciate him coming on and sharing his thoughts.
So give me an update on your planting season so far.
We're close to 100% on full season soybeans. I think our wheat's about, we're probably about, I would say we're 8 weeks from harvest here, 7 weeks, something like that, from wheat harvest. Corn planting, I just started on Monday. I don't know if we're half done yet, but we're close. We're probably, I've never only one other year, and Brian kept alluding to it, 2012, which everybody knows that year that's was farming at that time as one of the uh, biggest, most historic droughts in U.S. history. Pretty much affected the entire nation. It severely affected this area. That's the type of spring we're in right now. The type of progress that we were achieving in 12 is the type of progress that I'm achieving right now on my farm. So,
Oh,
uh,
hold on. You gotta wait like at least 4 more days so Spencer can come shoot some corn planting content. You cannot be done before Monday.
well, we do have some lowland to plant. So, Spencer will, I think a lot of our productive hills will be planted by the time Spencer gets here, just because the conditions are so great. He'll get to see some cool bottom land though, which everybody likes to see those great big open fields. So, uh,
We just have missed so many planting seasons the past few years because we're always too busy, and we are still too busy. Uh, yeah, just don't. Just wait like a little bit. Just make sure there's at least a little bit left. We're getting too busy. So,
busy is a good thing, but it also can be a thorn in the side of getting good film for socials.
no, I want as much. I like being busy with the right things. So, yeah. As far as, my stuff goes, I spent 5 hours last night in a tiny little lawn tractor with a 4-foot disc working on one of the fields in Iowa, and was probably not worth 5 hours of my time. So, that's where we're at, and it's gonna rain for 7 days, so I'm just gonna sit over here and cry by myself. I was on the phone with, Whitney at Kentucky American the other day, and she was like, "You just gotta be a little more optimistic," and I was like, "It's gonna rain for 7 days." I'm not I'm already 3 weeks behind, and it's gonna rain for 7 days. You think I'm happy about that?
I did see that spring wheat plantings were only at 3%, so we
Yeah,
got our spring wheat planted here in Kentucky.
I'm gonna add 0.000000001% to that little, metric there. So, yeah, so it's going. I got a 50-mile race tomorrow, so I'm gonna go run 50 miles because I like to suffer apparently, and it's the only thing I do outside of spending time with my family and working that yeah. I'm not even gonna say I won't lie to even say I enjoy it, but it's something I do. So,
Yeah, I can't, yeah. Wha Yeah, I can't imagine running 50 miles. That sounds completely unpleasant.
it will be completely unpleasant. If you wanna come watch, it's just in Peoria. It's probably only like 3.5 hours from you. So, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
It'll be alright. Yeah, you've got drought concerns. I have not drought. I have the exact opposite of that. I have water concerns. I don't think it was last year, it was 2 years ago where yeah, maybe it was 3 years ago, I'm trying to remember. We were doing a project with the Massey Ferguson team, and it rained for so many days. Like, I kid you not, all of April and May was pretty much rained out. There was, like, 4 days in the entire Midwest. I don't know if you remember that. It was, like, every other day, a giant wave of rain would come through. Like, if you drew a line from North Dakota down to Kansas, just across and straight into the Michigan. It was yeah. So I have concerns about that this year. I have many concerns about us having another planting season like that.
I think one of the reasons we're experiencing dry weather here is just because we're evening out from those 2 super rainy seasons that we experienced back to back. Just huge amounts of rainfall in 24 and 25
Mm,
throughout the spring and early summer, and then both 24 and 25. 24 moderate to light drought towards the end of summer, 25 pretty severe drought here towards the end of
yeah.
summer, and we've just continued dry since the 25 summer drought.
Yeah, I have a lot of concerns from the fact that there is not a lot of moisture out west that, a lot of our storms do come from west to
Hmm.
east, that there isn't going to be any moisture to pick up and bring this way like there normally is. Like I think we're going to see potentially a very low rainfall summer, which is honestly great for the wheat we were putting in here, but for everyone who isn't farming spring wheat in Iowa, which is everyone, it's not going to be that great. What are your thoughts on AI right now? It's just been there's a bunch of stuff. I mean, all the companies came up with new models last week. Apparently, Claude, they have a model that's learned to escape their containment servers. So that's a thing that happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing really how much it's progressing. I think, I saw a headline, I think it was this morning, where this war that they're currently fighting is a lot of it is being analyzed and fought with AI.
Mm,
So you're just seeing more and more and more of an industry relying on it. One of the young men that's working here, very smart kid, was talking about. Yeah, he knows a lot about that type of stuff, and he was just talking about its ability, what it could do, um, kind of what his thoughts were on it. As a very young man, it's interesting to hear him talk about it. He said one of his concerns was everybody starts relying on it, and then like some type of catastrophic situation happens, and they've relied on it so heavily that they can't function without it. I can see that happening. I hope that. That's not the case, that people still use their minds enough that they
mhm.
don't completely rely on it 100%. And but yeah, I mean, it's amazing what it's changing, and the efficiency that it brings everyone and all the industries.
Yeah, I don't know if I could I don't think I could be farming this year without it. I do not think I would have any concept of agronomy at all if it wasn't for the ability to ask questions, to do research, to have it do, like, in-depth analytical analysis, especially the spring wheat stuff. Like, there's nowhere else I could be collecting this data and learning the way I am because there's no one in the state of Iowa, it seems, to be able to call and ask questions. So I have to go outside the state, or I have to go and find resources that the universities have, or old books that were written, or historical data that was collected. There's some USDA data that I can pull from, probably 70 years ago that I'm like, oh, like this is handy. But if I called someone tomorrow, they couldn't tell me that existed. But I know it exists because AI was able to pull it up and summarize it for me. And I'm able to go find where that was posted. So, yeah, some pretty cool stuff. RFK's got a new podcast, the
That's
Maha
cool.
podcast, as they're going to call it. How much you want to bet episode 1 or 2 will be on Roundup? I'm just gonna like, what do we think it's gonna be? We think it's gonna be the first episode or the second episode?
It's definitely coming.
I think we will see, uh, episode number 1, fun intro, "Who's Robert F. Kennedy?" or something like that, and then we're gonna go, "Roundup's giving us all cancer," and then we're gonna go to how big food's ruining us all, and then we're gonna talk about laser weeders, and then after that, a few episodes later, we're gonna talk about small farms. Joel Salatin will be one of the first guests calling it. Yeah, I'm calling it all right now. We don't do any of those prediction markets, but if we were, the odds that Joel Salatin is a guest in the first 10 episodes of RFK Jr.'s new podcast, I would say are very, very high.
I love to read Joe's books, and I think I think his processes are pretty difficult to implement, but he is a outside the box thinker, and
Yeah.
I always enjoy listening to what his thoughts are, and I love his books.
Yeah, I run into the problem though of like he talks in a way that makes it sound way easier than it is. Like he goes to these conferences where he gets, put up on Capitol Hill to share these things about how regenerative farming is greater, animal impact, all these things. And it's like, bro, it is so hard to do what you do. Yes, it works. I would always, my mom, that's how he's in the right audience. He's got my mom sending me links about his stuff. And my mom's just like you, doesn't really believe we landed on the moon. She said when she's sending me stuff like that, I'm like, okay, his core audience is I own an acre and a half and I'm a homesteader and I hate the grocery store, which I also don't love the grocery store, but I understand that what he says here does not work on 10,000 acres in North Dakota without 50,000 people also working that. Like, there's just, I think it works. It's just, I don't think anyone's actually going to, there's not enough people to do the work for the systems he intends.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's what I was alluding to. That it's very difficult to implement his processes. I think his processes are great. I just
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it's when you're in an industry as broad and big as ours currently is in the U.S. and really worldwide, it's just so difficult to implement those processes that he's created.
Yeah.
Not to say they aren't worthy and great. It's just they're difficult.
No, I think everything, and I think, Gabe Brown, he wrote Dirt to Soil. I mean, same concepts, like really great stuff. And that's a little more on like, hey, you could implement at scale. And there are guys who are able to implement this over hundreds or thousands of acres, but there's always a caveat. Like, I follow this one farm on Instagram and they're really big on regenerative. They market all their beef regenerative. They're all about grazing, rotational pastures, what they don't show is that one of the guys is also a seed corn salesman and that probably subsidizes a decent portion of their income. Like you don't see that because it's not good for marketing. It's not good for marketing. But the reality is there's a lot of guys out there who start these direct to consumer companies or they say we're doing regenerative this, but it's like, hey, actually to survive in agriculture, they've realized, oh, I do have to play a part of the corn and soybean game to survive. Like that's the reality. Like I could not be doing what I'm trying to do in Iowa right now this year without partnering with someone who is trying to grow corn. Like it's just like I don't think that'd be possible. Maybe in a few years, but yeah, it's some interesting stuff. So, all right. Other than that, apparently we flew around the moon. Neil doesn't believe that. But we have people in space right now that are touching down soon, which is pretty neat. Um, yeah, it's cool and exciting to see. Do I think NASA's actually going to get us to the moon and Mars one day? No, I think SpaceX and Elon Musk will do that far before NASA ever does. But it's cool that there's people in space, allegedly, according to Neil.
I'll keep my opinions to myself.
All right. Well, I think that's everything. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the show, share it with everyone you know. We are continuing to invest more time and money into it. We are trying every week to make it better and better and better. Share the Spotify link or the podcast link. This goes up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts the day after. We have clips coming out. So yeah. Oh, John, one of our video editor, just commented. He says we ran around the moon, guys. Neil doesn't believe it, John. Sorry, hate to break it to you. So, I I think we're in space. I'm trying to be optimistic. Neil doesn't believe so. Anyways, you guys all have a wonderful day. We'll see you next week, Thursday, 12:30.